After harshly reprimanding the juniors, Jinye strode confidently, leading the merchants through the winding paths of the sect grounds. His posture was upright, his face betraying no emotion, but inside he brimmed with pride. Behind him, the merchants followed in their opulent silks, their expressions a mix of curiosity and greed. They had come here for more than just simple trade. They had come with an agenda. Jinye, basking in the thought of being hailed as the strongest student, had no inkling of what lay behind their polished smiles. Meanwhile, a figure in the shadows watched the scene unfold with sharp, calculating eyes. Jinmu, the ever-watchful observer. His instincts had been honed not just in this life, but in the life he had lived before. He had seen all kinds of merchants, all kinds of deals, and all kinds of men hungry for power. But these merchants, they were different. Jinmu's mind raced as he carefully observed their faces. He knew every reputable merchant from his previous life, yet none of these men were familiar. Something about them didn't sit right. His gaze sharpened, suspicion growing deeper by the minute. These merchants were worth keeping an eye on. The merchants immediately launched into their performance, showering the elders with compliments and veiled promises, each word dripping with honeyed flattery. They bowed low, their heads almost touching the ground, but their eyes were alive with hidden schemes. Jinye stood proudly by their side, completely oblivious to the deceit unfolding around him. As the merchants began presenting their gifts to the elders, the mood shifted dramatically. Gleaming swords of exquisite craftsmanship, chests overflowing with gold and silver, and promises of even more riches in the future, all meant to ensure the protection of the sect. The elders, who should have been wise and discerning, were instead swayed by the glitter of wealth. Their eyes gleamed with greed, and they nodded eagerly, pleased with the arrangement. To the merchants, it was clear. Money could buy anything, even the loyalty of supposedly venerable men. Jinhye, still riding high on his perceived success, stepped forward to offer his own contribution. Elders, esteemed merchants, I have prepared a showcase of my underlings' talents and special skills. Their performances will surely impress you, and I hope to earn your approval, he announced proudly, puffing out his chest. He saw this as an opportunity to shine, to further cement his place as the sect's strongest student, and to win favor not only from the elders, but also from the merchants who he believed could elevate his status further. However, as he left the hall, the scene outside was much less grand. The head of the merchants, a burly man with a sharp gleam in his eye, turned to his subordinate, a shrewd, calculating man who seemed less enamored with the pomp of their visit. Why are we wasting so much money on this dying sect? The subordinate asked, his voice a low whisper that barely reached beyond their circle. This place is nothing but a crumbling relic. We could have invested in the Juge sect instead. The merchant head chuckled, a cruel, knowing smile playing on his lips. The Juge sect? He scoffed. They're good, yes, but too sharp for our liking. They know their books, but they're even better with their ledgers. We wouldn't last a day trying to deal with them. They'd sniff out our smuggling operations before we even set foot on their grounds. But little did they know, their words had not gone unheard. From the shadows, Jinmu listened, his eyes narrowing dangerously as the merchant's conversation unfolded. His heart burned with anger, but his mind remained cold and calculating. That goat-mustached idiot, he muttered under his breath, his jaw clenched in frustration. So, you're smugglers. I won't let you get away with this. Jinmu's mind raced with possibilities. He had already decided to take control of the Wudang sect, but this new revelation only solidified his resolve. The merchants thought they could waltz in and take over, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. Jinmu smirked, his gaze hardening with determination. I've already decided to take over this sect, he thought to himself, and I won't let some smugglers ruin my plans. The Wudang sect is mine now. Inside the Yungyun Palace, a spectacle of skill and strategy. The grand hall of the Yungyun Palace was alive with energy. 18 disciples moved in unison, their swords spinning with lightning speed, creating a mesmerizing display of skill and discipline. Each blade cut through the air with precision, forming intricate patterns as the disciples execute their moves in perfect synchronization. The spectacle was nothing short of breathtaking, a testament to their rigorous training and dedication. The head merchant, seated in a place of honor, couldn't help but applaud. His eyes sparkled with genuine admiration as he watched the performance unfold. "Truly remarkable," he exclaimed, turning to the elder beside him. "You mentioned that these are second-class disciples, yet their skill is nothing short of extraordinary. I am amazed." The elder, a man of great wisdom and experience, nodded humbly, though a satisfied smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "We are grateful for your kind words and praise," he responded, the pride in his voice barely concealed. As the disciples continued their performance, Jinye stood by, observing the scene with a mixture of pride and anticipation. To him, this was a moment of validation, a moment where he could finally prove his worth in front of the association leader and the sect's master. But his moment of triumph was marred by the presence of one man, standing quietly in the shadows, Jinmu. Jinhee's gaze narrowed as it locked onto Jinmu, who was watching the performance with a calm, almost indifferent expression. Why is he here? Jinhee thought, a sliver of doubt creeping into his mind. He had orchestrated this event to showcase his talents, to solidify his standing within the sect. But Jinmu's presence unsettled him, and when their eyes met, Jinmu responded with a subtle, taunting smirk. A silent challenge that sent a shiver down Jinhee's spine. The elder, unaware of the silent exchange between the two, addressed Jinye. "Please, Jinye, proceed with the demonstration of the nine-headed strike. We are eager to witness your mastery." Jinye snapped back to attention, bowing respectfully. "Yes, master," he replied, masking his irritation at Jinmu's presence. But before he could begin, Jinmu called out to him, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "I'm looking forward to seeing your performance, Jinye," he said, his eyes glinting with amusement. It was clear that Jinmu was enjoying this, relishing in the discomfort he was causing. Jinye's fists clenched at his sides, his teeth grinding together in frustration. "Is he underestimating me?" he thought, his anger simmering beneath the surface. "In my own territory, the Grace Palace, no less." But he could not afford to lose his composure now, not with so much at stake. Swallowing his pride, Jinhye turned to his disciples, his voice commanding. "Form the nine palasaur sword formation," he ordered, his tone sharp and authoritative. The disciples, eager to impress, responded with enthusiasm, their voices ringing out in unison as they moved into position. The air buzzed with anticipation as the disciples began their intricate formation. Moving in a circular pattern, they performed their sword art with precision, their blades flashing as they clashed in perfect harmony. At first glance, it seemed chaotic, as if each disciple was acting independently. But upon closer inspection, it became clear that this was a well-rehearsed strategy, a tactic designed to confuse and overwhelm an enemy from all sides. Each movement was calculated, each step taken with the intent of keeping the opponent off balance, unable to predict the next strike. The true brilliance of the formation lay in its complexity. With 9 people moving in tandem, the formation was a test of both individual skill and group coordination. It was designed to showcase the abilities of the person in command, highlighting their tactical acumen and leadership. And Jinye, standing at the center of it all, reveled in the attention, confident that this performance would secure his place as the sect's rising star. As the demonstration reached its peak, Jinmu watched intently, his expression betraying a hint of admiration. "What an interesting formation," he remarked, his tone thoughtful. The elder, noticing Jinmu's interest, turned to him. "Are you impressed?" he asked, curiosity piqued. Jinmu nodded slightly, but added, "Yes, it is impressive. However, they need to focus more." The elder raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean by that?" Jinmu, placing a hand on his chin, began to speak, his words carefully chosen. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. "I haven't studied sword formations in depth, so I could be mistaken. But from what I've observed, after the initial spread, their next attack should decisively strike down the enemy, yet it feels like the formation is slightly off." The elder leaned forward, clearly interested. "You think so?" he asked, his tone both curious and respectful. Jinmu continued, his eyes focused on the disciples as they moved. "It seems to me that they are too concentrated on one side," he explained, pointing with his finger to the left flank. "If I were the enemy, I would exploit that weakness. As soon as the left flank attacked, I would retreat, forcing them to overextend. It would be more effective if the swords on that side slowed their pace, drawing the enemy in and then suddenly increase their speed for a surprise attack. It's a bit tricky, but with practice, it could be perfected. I really need to study more to be certain. The elder was taken aback by Jinmu's keen observation. He's just incredible, the elder thought, his mind racing. He figured all that out after seeing the formation just once. Not only can he identify its weaknesses, but he's already thinking of ways to improve it. I knew he was talented, but I didn't realize just how talented he really is. Unable to contain his amazement, the elder turned to Jinmu and asked, "Is this really your first time seeing this sword formation?" Jinmu, surprised by the direct question, quickly replied, "I apologize for speaking out of turn. I didn't mean to overstep." Before the elder could respond, the head merchant, who had been listening intently, interjected. "What are you discussing, elder? Is the formation truly that flawed?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. The elder smiled and introduced Jinmu to the merchant. "This is Jinmu, one of our new, highly talented students. We have high expectations for him." The merchant's eyes narrowed as he assessed Jinmu, his mind racing. "Another talented student?" he thought, a flicker of doubt crossing his mind. "Have I made a mistake by investing in that Jinye kid?" As if sensing the merchant's thoughts, Jinmu smirked, his eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and disdain. "Now you're paying attention," he thought, his mind already several steps ahead. "I know exactly what you're planning." His gaze shifted to Jinye, who was basking in the attention of the elders and the merchants. "That fool," Jinmu thought, his expression darkening. "You actually think you can surpass me and become the master's apprentice? How naive." Jinmu's thoughts turned to his ultimate goal, the mastery of the dual internal chi arts, a rare and powerful technique that would allow him to fuse the shadow dragon techniques from his past life with the Wudang skills of the present. This art, known only to the master's disciples, was the key to his plans. With it, he would wield unparalleled power, uniting the Orthodox Curium alliance under his control. But for his plan to succeed, he needed to eliminate all obstacles, and that included Jinye. As he watched Jinye, who was still basking in his temporary glory, Jinmu's eyes narrowed with determination. "These small fries think they can stand in my way?" he thought, his teeth gritting with barely contained fury. "For my plan to succeed, I'll crush every one of their schemes and end them all. The Wudang sect will be mine, and no one, especially not you, Jinye, will stop me." The next day, Jinmu sat at the dining table, his mind swirling with thoughts as he absent-mindedly poked at his meal. The recent visit from the Cheongyang Merchant Association and Gumjeoksan, along with the ever-ambitious first-class disciple Jinye, had set his mind on edge. Jinmu knew that to thwart their schemes, he needed to gather every detail about the Merchant Association, but the frustrating reality was that he was stuck on Mount Wudang, unable to leave. His face reflected this helplessness as he struggled internally, unaware that his master, Elder Myungjin, was observing him closely. Noticing the troubled look on Jinmu's face, Myungjin couldn't help but ask, "Jinmu, why are you thinking so much? What's on your mind?" Startled, Jinmu quickly denied any concerns, though he silently chastised himself for being too absorbed in his thoughts. Their friend Chungwoo, always the observant one, leaned in and whispered to Myungjin that Jinmu had been acting this way ever since the merchants visited 2 days ago. This revelation struck Myungjin, who realized that Jinmu might be yearning for the outside world after seeing people from beyond the mountain. Myungjin felt a pang of guilt, thinking of how Jinmu had spent years confined to the mountain, taking care of him. Trying to lighten the mood, Myungjin asked Jinmu what day it was, to which Jinmu replied that it was the 3rd day of the month tomorrow. Myungjin's face unexpectedly lit up with joy, and he smiled broadly, leaving Jinmu bewildered, wondering why his master was suddenly so cheerful. 2 days later, as the morning sun filtered through the paper screens, Jinmu entered his master's room and was greeted by an unexpected sight. Elder Myungjin was dressed in a dopo, a traditional Korean garment usually worn by the upper class. The sight of the old man, who rarely donned such formal attire, was surprising, to say the least. "Master, why are you wearing the dopo?" Jinmu asked, his surprise evident in his voice. Myungjin turned to his disciple with a serene smile. "I'm going to the Violet Cloud Palace today," he said calmly. Jinmu's eyes widened in shock. "Master, the wind is very cold," he exclaimed, his concern genuine. But inwardly, his thoughts were less about the weather and more about the consequences. "If you get sick again, I'll be stuck here even longer." Mangjin chuckled softly, brushing off Jinmu's worries. "Don't fret, my boy, I've worn warm clothes underneath. Besides, I've been feeling much stronger lately. Let's go." Jinmu couldn't help but wonder why the old man had been in such high spirits these past 2 days. As they made their way to the Violet Cloud Palace, Jinmu's thoughts turned inward. Every 5th day of the month, the Wudang sect holds an elders' conference. He mused. "This is the first time I've attended such an event. What could be so important that Master would insist on going, despite the cold?" As they approached the Grand Palace, they were greeted by Jinheo, another disciple, who welcomed them with a broad smile. "Master, I'm so glad to see you," Jinheo said, his face flushed with happiness. But Jinmu, already on edge, found Jinheo's cheerfulness irritating. Nevertheless, he maintained his respect for his master, bowing as Myeongjin responded with a warm smile. "Have you improved your martial arts?" Myeongjin inquired, genuinely interested. Jinheo blushed even more, his voice filled with admiration. "Thanks to Master Uncle's disciples, I've come to see the world differently. I've met an amazing junior brother as well. Right, Jinmu?" Jinmu barely acknowledged the compliment, smirking slightly as he looked away. "I wonder what this bastard is so happy about," Jinmu thought disdainfully, recalling how he had almost pummeled Jinheo into the ground not long ago. He should be grateful I didn't hit him harder. As they walked together, the disciples of the sect humbly bowed to Elder Myeongjin, expressing their respect and concern for his health. Jinmu was taken aback by the outpouring of admiration. Why are they all so polite and respectful? He wondered, his surprise giving way to a new understanding of his master's standing within the sect. Their journey took them deeper into the palace, where even the sect master himself came forward to greet Myeongjin. His face showed genuine concern as he asked, "Are you sure it's okay to be outside in this weather?" Myeongjin nodded reassuringly. "I've recovered well thanks to the care and support of my disciples. I can move freely now," he said, his voice steady and strong. The sect master's expression shifted slightly as he mused aloud. "Did eating meat really help that much? Perhaps I should have lifted the ban on meat much earlier." His tone carried a hint of regret as he considered the dietary restrictions he had imposed. Then, turning to Jinmu, the sect master placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You did well, Jinmu." The praise took Jinmu by surprise, and he struggled to hide his shock. Jinheo, ever the cheerful optimist, chimed in with a proud smile. "Aren't you proud of your master, Jinmu? You might not know, but Elder Myeongjin is the most respected elder in the Wudang sect. Before his illness, he was one of the candidates for clan master. When the evil sect's heavenly master attacked, he stood his ground, defending his disciples to the last. He's the Wudang sect's icon of resistance. That's why everyone respects him." Jinmu listened, his face betraying a mix of emotions. "I see," he murmured, his expression troubled. The realization weighed heavily on him. So he was a big deal after all. In my past life, I fought against him, thinking he was just an ascetic fool who tried to oppose me. I didn't know the full extent of his influence. The Elders' Conference was a gathering of the most influential members of the Wudang sect. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as they discussed upcoming events, expenses, and training strategies for the disciples. To Jinmu, however, the meeting felt interminable. "This is so boring," he thought, his irritation growing as the minutes dragged on. Just when he thought it couldn't get any worse, Elder Myeongjin raised his hand. Jinmu's irritation spiked. Why is he raising his hand? Is he trying to prolong this meeting even more? Myeongjin's voice cut through the room with calm authority. "We must carefully consider our ties with the new merchant association. While the potential benefits are clear, we cannot overlook the risks. We know nothing about the true source of their money." The room fell silent as the elders absorbed his words. Jin Yi, the first-class disciple, looked stunned, his face betraying his surprise. Myeongjin continued, "I propose that we attach some of our disciples to the merchants as a protective measure. This will allow us to observe their operations and uncover the truth behind their wealth. This is a well-known practice." One of the sect elders nodded thoughtfully. "Not a bad idea, but who should we send?" With a knowing smile, Myeongjin turned to the assembly. I recommend Jinmu. Jinmu's eyes widened in shock. He hadn't expected this at all. Is this why he's been acting so strangely these past 2 days? He wondered. Perhaps keeping him alive has finally paid off. I'm starting to take back all those times I thought he was useless. Jinhyo, ever supportive, quickly added, since the first-class disciples are busy, sending Jinmu is the best idea. And then, with a playful wink at Jinmu, he continued, besides, Jinmu's more than capable. Jinmu, now trying to contain a mix of surprise and amusement, thought to himself, you too. If I'd known this was coming, I wouldn't have hit you so hard before. The sect leader, observing the exchange, nodded in agreement. I concur. Jinmu seems to have a keen interest in this matter as well, he said, his tone carrying a weight of finality. Jinhye, who had been quietly seething, felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. This is a disaster, he thought, the realization hitting him hard. His carefully laid plans were beginning to unravel, and Jinmu's unexpected involvement was the last thing he needed. As the elders nodded in agreement, Jinmu felt a warm glow of satisfaction spread through him. He bowed deeply, expressing his gratitude. Thank you for this opportunity, he said, his voice steady with respect. But inside, his thoughts were racing. They say a well-raised master is worth more than 10 clans combined. Today, I'm starting to see the truth in that, Jinmu thought, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. This was more than just a mission. It was a chance to gather the information he needed to destroy the Chongyang Merchant Association's schemes from the inside. But as Jinmu's thoughts turned to the future, Jinye, standing nearby, was struggling to maintain his composure. His fists clenched in frustration, his mind a whirl of anger and fear. Such a pain in the ass, he muttered under his breath, glaring at Jinmu, who seemed to be basking in his new role. In the next scene, within the Enlightenment Hall, tension rises as Jinhye stands in the center, his voice raised in desperation, trying to convince the others to prevent Jinmu from going outside. The hall, usually a place of contemplation and discussion, now feels like a battleground of words and emotions. Jinye's frustration is palpable as he addresses senior brother Jingung, his tone sharp and accusing. Are you just going to stand by and watch this happen? He demands. Jinmu is a guy who is being punished for breaking the commandments. We can't send him outside. Jingung, ever the calm and collected leader, responds in a steady voice. You're not wrong, but it was already decided by the elders in the meeting. We can't change it. His words are firm, yet they do little to soothe Jinye's agitation. The frustration in Jinye's voice grows as he continues. All of us are from reputable families, destined to be part of the Wudang sect. But Jinmu, he's just a child, a peasant. He's riding on Master Uncle's support, clouding the judgment of the sect elders. His words, dripping with disdain, hang in the air like a challenge. Seeing Jinye's disrespectful demeanor, senior brother Jingung's patience finally snaps. His voice, usually measured, rises with uncharacteristic sternness as he shouts, Enough, Jinye! Stop talking! The command is sharp, cutting through Jinye's tirade, but Jinye is undeterred. I'm not wrong, he insists, lowering his voice but not his fervor. We all followed our destinies to be part of Wudang, but Jinmu is breaking all the sect's traditions. We must punish him for his actions. As the tension mounts, the door swings open and Jinhyo strides into the room, his presence immediately commanding attention. Are you getting too excited over something so useless? Jinhyo remarks, his voice carrying a mix of mockery and authority. What are traditions if they don't help us become stronger? Jinhye, taken aback by Jinhyo's sudden appearance, feels a mix of fear and anger. He retorts, though more cautiously now, Senior brother Jinhyo, it looks like you have a lot to say after losing to Jinmu and landing yourself in the Purification Palace for treatment. Jinhyo steps closer, a smirk playing on his lips. It seems you're jealous, he says, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Haven't you seen Master Myungjin? After eating meat, he got stronger and now walks around normally. And the ban on meat has already been lifted. Not to mention, Master Uncle was also in agreement for Jinmu to represent us. Jinye, now speechless, thinks to himself, this bastard is always poking his nose in. Jinhyo presses on. You've accomplished a great feat by connecting us with the Merchant Association, but how do you think senior brother Jingung sees you now? Connecting and communicating with outside influences is his job. You should have consulted with him before approaching Master Uncle Myungchung. Why did you go straight to the sect master about this matter? As he places a hand on Jinye's shoulder, Jinhyo adds, don't take things so seriously. You shouldn't use your position to boost your family's standing. Infuriated, Jinye tries to unsheath his sword, shouting, how dare you? As they prepare to clash, senior brother Jingung steps in, reminding them both of the respect and positions they hold within the sect. No one shall speak of the decision made in the elder meeting. Do you understand? He commands, before leaving the room with the other seniors, ignoring Jinye's objections. Outside, as evening falls and rain begins to pour, Jinmu walks with his master, carrying an umbrella. He smiles warmly at the old man, who notices and asks, why are you smiling at me like that? Jinmu replies, because you're awesome, thinking of how proud he is of his master for coming out despite his sickness. Master Myungjin, sensing Jinmu's excitement, says, boy, you're eager to explore the world, aren't you? Don't worry about me. Have a good time outside. Jinmu, puzzled, asks, good time? His master reassures him, sure, who said you can't have a good time? Jinmu, with a playful grin, adds, if I go down, I might eat meat and drink alcohol. To which Myungjin casually responds, that's okay, when I was younger, I used to drink alcohol too. Jinmu, pushing the joke further, says, I might even visit prostitutes, which shocks his master, making him pale. Jinmu quickly laughs it off, saying, I'm just joking, though Myungjin, now uneasy, thinks, something tells me he wasn't joking. As they reach the top, Jinmu's followers, Chungwoo and his friend, greet them, carrying luggage and hats to shield themselves from the rain. Jinmu, surprised, asks, what are you doing with all that? Chungwoo replies, I heard you're going out, so we're joining you. We already got the sect master's permission. We're your disciples, and wherever you go, we follow. Jinmu, taken aback, retorts, who is my disciple? I'm not crazy. Why would I bring you guys? I'll pick the right people myself for this mission. Now piss off. Ignoring their pleas, Jinmu continues walking with his master, leaving Chungwoo clinging to his feet, begging to be taken along. Watching this unfold, Jinye's anger boils over. Remembering his father's words from childhood, to become a great person and secure the family's fate, he takes a messenger pigeon, writes a message, and attaches it to the bird. As he releases it, he thinks, there's one rule that must not be broken no matter what, murder of someone within the same sect. You're not the only one who can break the commandments, foolish younger brother. In the next chapter, we are introduced to the strict and time-honored rules of the Wudang sect, a place where tradition holds the utmost importance. It is customary that whenever a sect disciple embarks on a journey, they must first go around to each palace within the sect and personally seek permission from all the elders. This protocol, steeped in the reverence of tradition, is not just a formality, but a test of the disciples' respect and patience. So Jinmu, accompanied by Chungwoo and Cheongsang, begins this arduous journey, traveling from one palace to another across the sprawling mountain range. As they set out, Jinmu's frustration grows. The realization dawns on him that each palace is not conveniently located next to the other. Instead, they are separated by vast distances, thousands of meters apart, perched on the jagged ridges of the mountain. The sheer physical demand of this task is daunting, and the idea of traversing the entire ridge fills Jinmu with a sense of irritation and exhaustion. They're expecting me to reach all of them? He mutters under his breath, barely containing his frustration. Meanwhile, his two disciples, Chungwoo and Cheongsang, are bursting with excitement, their youthful energy untainted by the tediousness of the task ahead. Let's go, master! They exclaim, their enthusiasm a stark contrast to Jinmu's growing displeasure. As they move from palace to palace, Jinmu can't help but curse the traditions and the elders who enforce them. Damn you all, he growls, his voice laced with bitterness. At the culmination hall, they are given new clothes as a gift, clothes that appear pristine and untouched, though Jinmu can tell they've been meticulously sewn to maintain that appearance. Yet as he receives the clothes, Jinhyo, a senior disciple who holds Jinmu in high regard, approaches with a broad smile. Haha, our junior brother is all grown up and going out for the first time. I couldn't be happier, Jinhyo says, tapping Jinmu on the shoulder in a gesture of camaraderie. Jinmu, however, remains wary, thinking to himself, why is he acting so friendly all of a sudden? The suspicious shift in Jinhyo's demeanor only adds to Jinmu's irritation, making him question the sincerity behind these smiles. The next stop is at the Grace Palace, where Jinmu is bombarded with a lengthy list of rules that he is expected to follow during his journey. The elder's voice drones on, listing one regulation after another, but Jinmu barely listens, his mind wandering elsewhere. He nods occasionally, giving the impression that he's paying attention, but in reality, he's mentally preparing himself for the journey ahead, ignoring the majority of the instructions. From the Jade Palace, he receives a new sword with a distinct yin-yang pattern on the hilt, a list of affiliations, golden recovery medicine, and bandages, all items intended to ensure his success and survival. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, Jinmu, along with Chengwu and Chengsang, reaches the Violet Cloud Palace to seek the sect master's permission, the last and most important stop on their journey. Exhausted both physically and mentally, Jinmu can barely muster the energy to bow as they pay their respects. The sect master, a figure of authority and wisdom, observes them with a discerning eye. So, Chengwu and Chengsang are going with you? Good. They are smart children and will help you, he says. The sect master's words are meant to be reassuring, and both disciples blush with pride at the praise. However, Jinmu thinks to himself, they're not smart, but I have no other choice since nobody else volunteered. The thought is tinged with frustration, but he hides it behind a polite smile. The sect master's final words are a solemn reminder of the weight of their mission. Do not bring a bad name to the Wudang sect at any cost, he instructs, his tone firm and unwavering. Jinmu nods, agreeing with a forced smile, eager to leave the confines of the palace. As soon as the sect master grants his permission, Jinmu rushes outside, his face lighting up with a rare moment of joy, eager to escape the stifling atmosphere. But just as he thinks he's free, Jinmu hears the sect master call out to him again. Frustrated and on the brink of anger, Jinmu turns around sharply. What is it now? He asks, barely masking his irritation. The sect master fixes him with a stern gaze, his voice dropping to a serious tone. Be sure to contact us once a day. The command is clear and non-negotiable, leaving no room for disobedience. Jinmu, suddenly feeling the weight of responsibility, nods quickly. Yes, sect master, he replies, his confidence momentarily shaken as he sweats nervously under the old man's piercing stare. With the formalities finally behind them, the three disciples step outside, the fresh air and open space a welcome change from the rigid halls of the Wudang sect. Jinmu, unable to contain his happiness, breathes in deeply, lifting his hands to the sky. Fresh air, he exclaims, the simple pleasure of freedom washing over him. Seeing their master so joyful, Chengwu and Chengsang smile as well, their faces flushed with excitement. But Jinmu, ever practical, quickly shifts back to his usual commanding self. He calls both disciples over and hands his luggage to Chengwu and his sword to Chengsang. Chengsang, however, is not pleased. With a concerned expression, he speaks up. Master, a sword must be carried by its owner. A sword is akin to a swordsman's life. His words are careful, showing both respect and worry. Jinmu, with a smirk that hints at both amusement and challenge, responds, Do you want me to send you back? Chengsang immediately stiffens, realizing the gravity of his master's words. Without another word, he takes the sword, placing it behind his back, and says with renewed determination, I will take care of it like my life depends on it. Satisfied, Jinmu nods, turning his attention to the path ahead. The distance from here to the Merchants Association is around 40,000 meters, Jinmu explains, his tone now all business. It should take less than half a day with a horse ride, so let's pick up the pace. Both disciples agree eagerly, and they set off, their first journey together as master and students. However, their journey is soon interrupted by a group of bandits. Their leader, a menacing figure with striking red hair, steps forward and orders, Give me everything you have. Jinmu, his face impassive, thinks to himself, In recent years, the world has changed a lot, and tons of these idiots have appeared, but to rob an ascetic right in front of the Wudang sect? Are they out of their minds? His thoughts are calm, almost detached, as if the situation is more of an annoyance than a threat. Chengsang, with a strong and resolute voice, steps forward, his face set in determination. Leave now before you get injured. How dare you stand in front of Mount Wudang and threaten us? Stop this foolishness before it's too late. His words are firm, but the bandit leader merely sneers, drawing both of his knives and taking a combat stance. "You're the fool," the bandit leader retorts, his voice filled with contempt. "A sect that's on its decline. Who would fear you? Hand over everything or we'll take it by force. And if you have any money, you'd better hand that over too." The tension escalates as the bandits' evil intentions become clear, their hostility almost tangible in the air. Jinmu, observing the situation with a blank expression, thinks these bandits are so cliché. He calls out to Cheungsang, his voice steady. "Let's take care of this quickly. We must arrive before sunset." Chungwoo, visibly nervous, stands behind Jinmu, his face slick with sweat. Cheungsang, his resolve unshaken, Wundus responds firmly, "Yes, Master Uncle." He then gives the bandits one final warning. "If you give up now, you won't get hurt." But the bandit leader, undeterred, commands his men to attack. They charge at Cheungsang all at once, their movements wild and uncoordinated. Cheungsang, however, remains calm. He dodges the initial attack by bending backward, then leaps into the air as two more bandits strike. With swift, precise movements, he smacks both of them on their shoulders and backs, Wondus not even bothering to draw his sword from its sheath. He lands gracefully, his feet barely making a sound, while the bandits stumble, clutching at their wounds. The remaining two bandits, enraged, rush at Cheungsang. He meets their attack head-on, using his sword to block their strikes. Jinmu, watching closely, notes that most of the bandits are weak, save for two who show some skill. They must be the leaders. Jinmu smirks, finding their tactics laughable. How absurd, he thinks, making their subordinates charge ahead while they hide behind, looking for an opening. As the fight continues, Jinmu reflects on Cheungsang's abilities. Cheungsang is already capable of infusing energy into his sword. He's a martial artist, just one level below being able to use sword chi. On top of that, he recently received lessons from me and has become much stronger. Even if two of them attack him together, Cheungsang will still be better than them. However, as one of the bandit leaders rushes in to attack, Cheungsang's grip slips and he lets go of his sword. Shocked and sweating, Cheungsang finds himself defenseless, and the bandits seize the opportunity to attack him relentlessly. Jinmu, observing with a critical eye, realizes Cheungsang doesn't have any real experience in Murim. Unlike training, where everything is expected, an actual fight has unpredictable attacks and movements. A Murim practitioner like Cheungsang, who has only ever trained in the mountains, will be surprised when he first encounters such a fight, and confusion often leads to mistakes. As Cheungsang struggles, trying desperately to dodge the bandits' attacks, he receives several injuries. His movements become sluggish, and finally he slips, falling backward. Jinmu continues to analyze the situation, thinking, sometimes a weaker opponent might win against you. As Cheungsang falls, a bandit's sword glints in the light, coming down towards him. Cheungsang is on the verge of being struck by the sword, his mind racing as he realizes it's too late to dodge. Just as the blade is about to connect, two hands appear out of nowhere, stopping the attack. It's Jinmu. Cheungsang, surprised, looks up as Jinmu calmly says, "I let you fight so you could gain some experience." With a show of incredible strength, Jinmu snaps the sword into pieces with his bare hands. Without hesitation, he delivers a powerful knee strike to the bandit's stomach, lifting him off the ground. Jinmu then leaps into the air, bringing both fists down on the bandit's back with immense force, causing the bandit to collapse, unconscious. Jinmu places his foot on the bandit's head and addresses the two remaining leaders with a serious expression. "You both seem to have more experience than the others. Why is that? Did someone hire you?" he asks, his tone both cunning and commanding. One of the bandit leaders, in a desperate attempt to escape, throws several kunai at Jinmu, but Jinmu swiftly deflects them all. The leader, realizing he's outmatched, turns and tries to flee. However, Jinmu catches up instantly, slamming him to the ground. "Who gave you permission to run away?" Jinmu demands, his voice calm yet authoritative. Holding the bandit down, Jinmu grabs him by the arm and asks, "Who sent you?" The bandit, trying to maintain his bravado, smirks and replies, "You think I'll tell you that?" Jinmu, unfazed, smiles coldly and says, "Is that so?" He then applies pressure to the bandit's arm, causing him to cry out in pain. "Did you really think I'd just ask a few questions and let you go?" Jinmu's voice remains calm, but his actions are decisive. The bandit, unable to bear the pain, starts to crack. Jinmu continues to apply pressure, ensuring the bandit understands he's not to be taken lightly. Desperate, the bandit accuses Jinmu of being cruel, but Jinmu simply replies, "You attacked first. You're the one who made this necessary." The bandit, now frightened, hesitates but eventually begins to reveal what he knows. Seeing this, the other bandits begin to tremble, realizing they are dealing with someone far more formidable than they had anticipated. As Jinmu finishes, he looks down at his now dirty uniform and thinks, "This was a new uniform, and now it's ruined." The bandits, thoroughly terrified, begin shouting that they'll tell him everything, desperate to avoid further punishment. As they confess, Jinmu and his disciples learn that these bandits are part of a gang operating in the back streets of Danjiangkou under the notorious Eight Dragons gang. Their main job is to collect protection fees, but today they were ordered by their boss, Li Palryong, to capture Jinmu and his companions. The two bandits who had been beaten earlier are known as the Twin Savages, infamous in the underworld of Danjiangkou. They had assumed that kidnapping these three disciples would be an easy task, but they were sorely mistaken. Jinmu considers the situation, realizing that someone must have hired these bandits, but he wonders why anyone would target their sect, even in its weakened state. Who would dare to order something like this? Jinmu muses, trying to piece together the mystery. He then asks the bandits directly, "Who is behind this?" But the bandits exchange clueless looks, clearly unaware of who gave the order. Jinmu then turns to the leader and asks, "How much is your boss's bounty worth?" The bandit hesitates before responding, "About 10 silver yangs." Jinmu, unimpressed, mutters, "That's too cheap." He then asks the bandits if they have any money on them. Without hesitation, they hand over their pouches, hoping to appease him. Jinmu takes the money and orders them to leave. Chengwu and Chengsang, shocked and angry, exclaim, "Master, are you really taking their money?" Jinmu, ignoring their protests, warns the bandits not to tell Li Palryong what happened and informs them of the consequences if they do, bending a coin with his fingers as a show of strength. The bandits, thoroughly intimidated, promise not to say anything and vow to reform their ways. They run away, terrified, while Chengwu and Chengsang remain stunned. Even though the bandits were in the wrong, the disciples are shocked by how decisively Jinmu dealt with them and by the fact that he took their money afterward. With a calm demeanor, Jinmu instructs both disciples to bring the twin savages down the mountain as they continue their descent, a smile playing on his lips. Next chapter, at night, our heroes finally reach the entrance of Danjiangkou's Silverfang County, where the imposing Silverfang County Magistrates Court stands. We see the county employees busily carrying the infamous twin savages on stretchers, their faces marked with defeat and fear. As they approach, Jinmu turns to his two companions, Chengsang and Chengwu, and instructs them with authority in his voice, "I'll go inside to speak with the magistrate. You two, wait here." Both disciples, still reeling from the long journey, nod in agreement, though weariness is evident on their faces. As soon as Jinmu steps away, the toll of the journey hits them hard. Both disciples collapse onto the ground, completely exhausted, having not rested once during their travels. Chengwu, breathing heavily, looks over at Chengsang and asks, "Is Jinmu's behavior normal? I knew he was strict, but the way he dealt with those bandits, it was almost terrifying," his voice tinged with concern and confusion. Chengsang, however, looks up with admiration shining in his eyes. "I respect what he did," he says firmly. "Those people we encountered were not just any criminals. They were bandits who have caused unimaginable suffering in countless lives. Do you really think they would hesitate to commit such atrocities again if given the chance?" Chengwu, taken aback by Chengsang's intensity, seems to grasp something he hadn't considered before. Chengsang continues, "Did you see the terror in their eyes as they fled? That wasn't just fear. It was the realization that they had met someone who wouldn't let them off easily." With a distant look in his eyes, Chengsang recalls a painful memory from his past. "I've lost my whole family to robbers," he confesses, his voice heavy with the weight of his words. We are then drawn into a flashback of his childhood, where a group of ruthless robbers mercilessly attacks his family, leaving young Chengsang alone in a world suddenly devoid of love and safety. He continues, "Those bandits slaughtered innocent villagers and my family without a second thought. If it weren't for Elder Myungjin, I wouldn't be here today. But Do you know what happened after that? Those same bandits were released, bailed out through bribery, and they continue their reign of terror to this day. With a grim determination etched on his face, Chung-sang declares, I can never forgive them. My desire for justice drives me. It's the reason I took up the sword. The elders always told me to find peace within and forgive those who wronged me. But Uncle Jinmu, he was different. Thanks to him, I finally understand what true guidance means. He didn't just punish those criminals. He made sure they would never forget their fear. He's the kind of person who walks through hell to bring light to others. Today, I've made a decision. I will follow in Jinmu's footsteps, no matter how difficult the path, and become his disciple, he says, tears of conviction and admiration streaming down his face as he places a hand over his heart. Chungwoo, deeply moved, feels a swell of emotion rising within him, and he too begins to cry, inspired by Chung-sang's resolve and Jinmu's unwavering sense of justice. To think Master had such deep intentions behind his actions. I had no idea, Chungwoo whispers, his voice filled with newfound respect and awe. Meanwhile, inside the magistrate's office, the atmosphere is tense. Jinmu, with a grip as firm as his resolve, holds the magistrate by the collar, demanding, "At least one more nyang?" I struggled so much to capture them. Didn't you see how their clothes were all torn up? Why only 20 nyangs? Just give me one more, he insists, a mischievous, greedy look on his face. The officer replies, "You're really a persistent ascetic. I already told you it's a fixed price, and their faces are so damaged that we can barely identify them." After a lot of back and forth, the officer reluctantly gives Jinmu one more coin, bringing a satisfied smile to Jinmu's face. Jinmu then asks, "Do you know Li Palryong?" To which the officer responds, "Of course, from the Dragon's Gang." With a cunning grin, Jinmu asks, "How much is he worth? What's his bounty?" The officer, surprised and confused, snaps out of it and says, 20 coins. Jinmu is pleased to hear this amount and thinks to himself, I'm proud of him, but I'm also practical, and I'll claim the reward by turning him in to the authorities. The officer continues, "It's not easy to capture him. We've tried several times. He's a skilled martial artist and as elusive as a loach, always finding a way to hide." Jinmu is taken aback to learn that Li Palryong is a martial artist. Danjiangkou is in the Jegal family's territory. Unless someone is actively looking for trouble, how could they expand their territory into Jegal family's domain, he thinks. He continues his thoughts. It's obvious where they would hide, the gambling night market and the red light district. His face lights up at the thought of earning more money and gathering more information on who hired the bandits. As soon as he exits the office, both Chung-sang and Chung-woo bow and shout, "Master, we respect you, and we will follow you forever." Jinmu, puzzled, simply replies, "Let's have dinner." Hearing the word dinner, Chung-woo's eyes light up, and he starts drooling in anticipation. Jinmu adds, "It's a special day. We'll have unlimited meat and alcohol." Jinmu orders meat, instructing the servers to bring it non-stop until they ask them to stop. "It's all you can eat today," he declares, and all three of them eagerly await the food. Chungwoo and Chung-sang are mesmerized by the taste of the food. Jinmu thinks, this is meat with spices. They must be thrilled to try this for the first time. However, other customers start gossiping about the Wudang sect disciples' behavior and their choice of food and alcohol, which frustrates Jinmu. He chooses to ignore them. Meanwhile, Li Palryong's underlings sit and observe Jinmu's group, thinking to themselves, it looks like those bandits failed. One of them orders the other to inform Li Palryong, and they both leave. As they depart, new figures wearing distinctive uniforms appear. One asks, "Should we follow them?" The leader responds, "We're just here to inspect Silverfang County, which is within our jurisdiction. Don't pursue them." This character is Jegal Gain, the second son of the Jegal family in Danjiangkou. He asks his bodyguard, "Are those the disciples of the Wudang sect?" They were once pushed out from the center of the 8 sects and have kept themselves isolated from the world. Jegal-gun then observes, "Do they eat meat and drink alcohol? It's surprising," he says, watching Jinmu's group as they enjoy their meal. Jegal-gun, the second son of the Jegal family and a direct descendant of the powerful Danjiangkou province, holds an influence that words can barely capture. His bodyguard, observing the young disciples, remarks that they likely belong to the second class, which he believes is why their sect is in decline. However, Jegelgun counters with a knowing smile, questioning the certainty of their downfall. Even though they hide in the mountains, the Wudang sect is still like a tiger. Among them, there is always one who, starving, emerges for one reason only, for food, he says, his eyes narrowing in thought. He then calls for Gahu, instructing him to test the disciples' abilities without harming them. Find out if they are dogs or tigers, he orders. If they're second class, their skill level should be equivalent to first-rate martial artists at best. Since you've reached the level of mystic chi, you can apply just enough pressure to test them without going overboard. Gahu, confident in his abilities, agrees. Sure, master, I'll pressure them just enough to humble them a bit, he replies with a sly grin. Approaching Jinmu, Gahu introduces himself, his tone friendly, but with an underlying edge. I've always admired the Wudang sect. It must be fate that we meet here. How about I buy you guys a drink? He suggests, the grin on his face not quite reaching his eyes. Jinmu, seeing through Gahu's pretense, responds with a smirk. You're good at talking nonsense, he retorts, turning toward Gahu with a look of disdain. It's obvious what you want. You guys are trying too hard, he adds, his tone laced with sarcasm. Gahu, taken aback by Jinmu's audacity, wonders to himself, what kind of ascetic is this? He talks and acts worse than a street thug, and his clothes, they reek of blood. It's like he's a thug in stolen ascetic robes. Jinmu continues, his voice rising as he addresses the room. There are too many people in this inn who are getting on my nerves today, insulting me and my sect just because of what we eat and drink, he declares, his words sending a chill through those who had been gossiping earlier. Fear grips them, and they begin to quietly leave the room, unable to meet Jinmu's gaze. Turning back to Gahu, Jinmu challenges him directly. If you want to test our strength, come and see for yourself. But how dare you send one of your dogs to do it? The insult cuts deep, and Gahu, now visibly frustrated, snaps, How dare you call me a dog? Jinmu, however, dismisses him with a wave. Ah, forget it, he says nonchalantly, before calling out to Chengsang. This person is curious about your skills. Don't disappoint me, and if you fight like a fool again, you'll regret it, he warns. Chengsang, with a determined nod, steps forward to face Gahu. As the two square off, Gahu glances back at his master, his thoughts racing. Damn it, this isn't how I wanted things to go, he thinks, realizing he's lost control of the situation. Jegelgen, observing the unfolding events with a mix of irritation and interest, thinks, You fool, you've lost the upper hand, but at least now I can gauge his skills directly. On top of eating meat and drinking alcohol, he acts like a thug. What a unique ascetic. A grin spreads across his face as he muses. It looks like he's at least a wolf cub. Gahu, readying himself for the fight, assumes a stance without drawing his blade. I hope your skills are as sharp as your tongue, he says. Jinmu, noticing this, calls out, Hey, what are you doing? Our Chengsang will be using a sword. Gahu's irritation grows as he realizes the fight won't be on equal terms. Taking on someone wielding a sword while he fights barehanded seems unfair, but his pride won't let him back down. Grinding his teeth, Gahu reflects on the situation. He said Chengsang, so it's confirmed. He's a second-class disciple, but I'm one of the top martial masters in the Jegel family. There's no way I'm unsheathing my sword for a mere second-class disciple, he thinks, before shouting, Bare fist arts will do. Jinmu, with a confident smile, says, You'll regret that. And with a commanding voice, he orders Chengsang to go all out. Chengsang begins his attack with a swift strike aimed directly at Gahu's face, his sword slicing through the air with precision. Gahu is taken by surprise and barely manages to dodge the blow. Jinmu watches with a smirk, mentally narrating, The flowing cloud sword, striking with such precision, is more like lightning than a flowing cloud. As the battle intensifies, Chengsang unleashes a series of powerful swings, each one pushing Gahu to his limits. Gahu, realizing the seriousness of the fight, switches to offense, landing a kick on Chengsang's back and following it up with a punch to the stomach. He's an amateur with so many weak points, Gahu thinks, delivering an elbow to Chengsang's face and targeting his lower body. It seems like Chengsang is on the losing side, but Jinmu remains unfazed. He thinks to himself, the flowing cloud sword's weakness is in its defense, particularly in the first hand and lower body. But I've already taught Chengsang about these weaknesses, and he overcame them long ago. With an approving, almost sinister expression, Jinmu concludes, he's deliberately showing his weaknesses. Chungsang, you clever rascal, when did you become so cunning? Who, sensing Chungsang's apparent weaknesses, decides to exploit them fully. With a determined leap from the table, he launches a wide-range attack. Chungsang blocks the blow with his sword, but Gahu quickly follows up with a powerful kick to Chungsang's stomach. Encouraged by the success of his attacks, Gahu throws another punch, confidently declaring that this will be the end. However, Chungsang unexpectedly dodges by swooping down, leaving Gahu momentarily stunned. Realizing too late that he has exposed his own vulnerability, Gahu understands that he has fallen into a trap. Seizing the opportunity, Chungsang counters by driving his weapon toward Gahu's throat, the blade unsheathed. Gahu crashes into a table, fear and shock written across his face as Chungsang raises his weapon to strike again. The sound of Chungsang's relentless blows echoes through the room, bringing a satisfied smile to Jinmu's face. Well done, Jinmu thinks to himself, pleased with Chungsang's performance. If you're going to fight, do it properly. It was worth teaching this guy. Watching his subordinate struggle, Jegul Gaon's anger flares. How can you lose to a second-year disciple like that? It's disgraceful. You should be ashamed, he shouts, his frustration evident. Gahu, stung by his master's harsh words, feels a surge of determination. Without hesitation, he draws his blade, a dark purple aura emanating from it as he swings with newfound intensity. The force of the blow is so strong that it knocks the sheath from Chungsang's sword. The atmosphere around Gahu shifts. He's no longer holding back as he takes up a battle stance, shouting, "You're going to regret this." Jinmu, watching intently, recognizes the advanced technique Gahu is using. That's a special move of a first-rate martial artist, sword chi, he mutters, frustration creeping into his voice. He was about to win, but he should have taken the opportunity when he had the upper hand, Jinmu thinks, regretting that Chungsang didn't capitalize on his earlier advantage. Just as Jinmu decides to step in, he halts, surprised to see Chungsang channeling his chi into the sword, creating a charged blade with lightning crackling around it. Intrigued, Jinmu decides to observe the situation a bit longer. Chungwoo, filled with worry, exclaims, "Master Uncle, it's Sword Chi, we need to help him." But Jinmu sharply retorts, "Quiet, just watch." Gahu, seeing the charged sword, is genuinely impressed. For a 20-year-old to manage a charged sword, that's pretty impressive, he thinks. But he knows the difference between Sword Chi and a charged sword is vast, both in the concentration of Chi and the power they wield. More importantly, Sword Chi allows an attack from a distance, greatly expanding the range of potential strikes. "Prepare yourself," Gahu shouts as he swings his Sword Chi around the room. The purple aura lashes out like a whip, but Chungsang deftly dodges, jumping onto a table to avoid the attack. Gahu strikes again, but Chungsang leaps away just in time, causing Gahu's blow to shatter the table instead. Chungsang, refusing to back down, runs and leaps off a pillar, launching himself back towards Gahu. The sudden close-in shocks Gahu, who swings his sword again in frustration. Chungsang barely manages to block the attack with his own sword, but the force of it knocks him to the ground. Undeterred, he quickly regains his footing, taking a knee to steady himself. Jinmu watches with growing admiration, thinking, "Well done, Chungsang. You're giving it your all to close the gap and find an opening. You already understand the difference in skill between you and Gahu, but your spirit hasn't wavered." A proud grin spreads across Jinmu's face. "Even though you're not my direct disciple, I should train you to avoid situations like this," he muses before suddenly disappearing from his spot, moving with incredible speed. Jinmu interrupts the fight, casually addressing Gahu with a taunt. "Hey, Mustachio, you're really going all out by drawing your sword and everything? Since you're pretty good, I'll join in. Don't be rough on my kind boy over there." Gahu, irritated by Jinmu's intrusion, snaps, "You don't interrupt our match." Chungsang, determined, shouts, "Master Uncle, I can still fight." The room falls silent as those watching realize the significance of Chungsang's words. They whisper among themselves, "He's calling him Master Uncle? Does that mean he's a Jin?" The realization dawns on them. Jins are the first-class disciples of the Wudang sect, martial artists who train directly under the sect elders. Typically in their mid-30s, they are crucial members of the sect. Jegul Gaon, shocked, murmurs, "That young child is a Jin? I can't believe it." As Chung-sang insists he can continue the fight, Jinmu gently but firmly stops him. Chung-sang, he says, and the disappointment is evident in Chung-sang's expression as he thinks, I've disappointed my master again. But Jinmu continues, you did very well. From now on, I'll teach you how to handle opponents like this. Watch and learn. If you enjoyed my narration and found that the images align well with the story, I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Your support means a lot. Thank you.